Let me tell you how I bought a single-family rental property for just $1,000. Not $1,000 down, not $1,000 per month. I mean $1,000 total. It sounds dumb, because it kind of is, but it's also one of the smartest tricks I've ever used in real estate. And once you learn how it works, you'll start looking for opportunities like this yourself. Let me explain. If you're trying to scale your rental portfolio without tying up a ton of cash, or you want to keep more options open when refinancing deals, this little trick could save you tens of thousands of dollars. I call it parcel hacking, and I've used it successfully on multiple deals, each time walking away with more control, more flexibility, and more upside. Let me show you how it worked the first time I used it. Back in 2013, I was about to buy what looked like a 3-unit rental property. But when I looked a little closer, I realized that the property was actually 2 separate legal parcels. The deal comprised a 2-family house on one lot and a single family on an adjacent lot. The seller was marketing them both together as though they were one property, probably because it was just easier for her to advertise them that way. The asking price was dirt cheap by today's standards, just $114,000. But ignore that. This strategy works the same way whether the asking price is $100,000 or $1 million. I offered $108,000 total, and the seller agreed. Now, most buyers would have financed both properties under one loan, but instead, I asked the seller to sign 2 separate purchase contracts. One contract for $107,000 for the 2-family property, and a second contract for $1,000 for the single-family property. Then I went to the bank and showed them only the contract for the 2-family. Since the 2-family was a standalone property on its own lot, there was no reason to mention the single-family property. The bank underwrote the loan based solely on the duplex and financed 75% of the $107,000 purchase price. The key, of course, was that the duplex by itself had to appraise for at least $107,000 in order for the trick to work. It did in that case, and we proceeded to closing. My out-of-pocket cost was almost exactly the same as it would have been if I had financed both properties together. 25% of $107,000 for the 2-family came to $26,750. Plus the $1,000 for the single family, the total out-of-pocket for the down payments came to $27,750. If I had financed both of them together with the same bank, I would have paid 25% of $108,000, which would have come to $27,000. What the parcel hacking strategy did for me is not help me save money on the front end, but what it allowed me to do on the back end. Because I paid cash for the single family, I owned it free and clear. So a year later, I did a cash-out refinance on that single family and was able to pull out $48,000 in tax-free capital. This money helped me cover all of my expenses on these properties and then some. I could have just as easily sold the single family and used the proceeds to pay down the mortgage on the duplex, or just reinvest the proceeds in another deal. The point is that by splitting the purchase into 2 separate contracts and loading up the bank financing on just one of the properties, I gave myself numerous additional options and access to equity, which otherwise would have been locked down by the bank mortgage. It's a super simple and even kind of stupid trick, but it has huge implications and upside if you do it right. The reason this works is because it is almost always true that properties which are bundled together will appraise for less money in a single appraisal than when they are appraised separately. I've seen it happen again and again. So why not use this feature of the real estate industry to your advantage? Of course, the loading of the financing has to be done within reason, but it's so stupid simple that it has worked for me numerous times. Now, maybe you're thinking, but what if I can't get the larger property to appraise high enough to cover the full purchase price? Good question. But the answer is, it doesn't have to. This trick still works even if you only load part of the total purchase price onto one property. Let's say you're buying 2 properties, a duplex and a small single family, like in my example, for a total of $400,000. You estimate the duplex by itself could appraise for $300,000, and the smaller property might appraise for $180,000. So you sign separate purchase contracts with the seller, one for the duplex at $300,000 and one for the single family at $100,000. You get a loan on the duplex at 80% loan to value, or $240,000, which means your down payment for it would be $60,000. Then you fund the $100,000 purchase price for the smaller property with private financing or your own cash, or a combination of your own cash and some other short-term funds. Then once you own both, wait out any seasoning period your refi bank requires and then refinance the smaller property. In my market, several lenders allow cash-out refis up to 80% LTV on rental properties within just a few months of purchase. So if that smaller property appraises for $180,000, you can pull out $144,000 in cash-out proceeds. After paying off your private lender and/or reimbursing yourself on your single-family investment, you would have a $44,000 surplus, which would mean that you only had to invest a total of $16,000 out of pocket as a down payment to buy this entire deal. Now, I'm simplifying a bit because there would be closing costs on both the purchases and the cash-out refi. But just for the purpose of demonstrating and helping you understand the concept, I'm going to keep the closing costs out of it. So just for clarity, here's the math. Down payment on the two-family property, $60,000. Cash invested to buy the single-family property, $100,000. Total cash invested, $160,000. Cash returned to you from the refinance, $144,000. Total cash left in the deal, $160,000 minus $144,000 equals $16,000. So in this example, you still own both properties, but you only put $16,000 down, which comes to just 4% of the total $400,000 purchase price. Had you done it the traditional way, where you financed both properties together and paid 20% of the $400,000 purchase price, you would have had $80,000 of your money locked up. I hope the difference and the benefit is apparent. But with that said, there are a few things that you need to consider before you make an offer on a deal like this. Number one, make sure the properties are actually on separate tax lots. That's the key. Number two, make sure you create and sign two separate contracts with the seller. If you try to do it with a single contract, it might not work. The bank might have an issue with it, or the appraiser might get influenced by the purchase prices on both properties. Splitting the contracts allows you to present just the finance property to the bank and keeps the other contract off their radar entirely. Number three, if there are any shared features like sewer lines or water lines, make sure that they can be separated without a significant expense. This is something that I had to do with those two properties I bought in 2013, where I had to separate a water line and have the city install a new meter at the single-family cottage. If you need to do something like that, make sure you budget the cost of it into your analysis of whether parcel hacking will make sense in your situation. So to sum up this stupid trick, if you're buying multiple parcels from the same seller, split the contracts. Finance the one that appraises the strongest and pay cash or private funds for the other. Then unlock the equity in that second property later through a refinance or resale. You'll save yourself a ton of money, increase your exit options, and potentially own a property free and clear for even as low as $1,000. This trick helped me scale my portfolio early, and I've used this approach multiple times with great success. If you want to learn more real-world tactics like this that actually work, subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment if you've ever seen a deal like this and weren't sure how to approach it. And if you're serious about house hacking and building your rental portfolio, join my House Hack Mastery community, where I go deeper on creative financing strategies, and you can ask me your questions directly. The link is in the description.